of Frilchen Purim. This is Gemar Yevamos Daf Yod. Today's Shir, the Shir of Purim, the Shir the day in which we know in which the Zohar explains it doesn't just mean tzedakah, whoever sticks out his hand, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us whoever sticks out his hand to me, Hashem will answer bakashos. That's why tefillah and everything is so important on Tainis Esther and on Purim, etc. So on today, the day of Purim for everywhere out of Yerushalayim, today's Shir has been generously donated by a close friend of the Daf as a schos brach and Yeshua for Zalman Asher ben Bila. The schos of the entire Chabura is learning Talmud Torah K'neged Kulam on such a holy day as Purim. Kol HaPoisha Anoisin Lai Zalman Asher ben Bila should see incredible bracha and Yeshua. As well as today's Shir has been sponsored by a very close friend of the Daf for a long time, Harav Moshe. The Shir should be as schos for Hatzlachas Moshe ben Bila v'chol mishpachtai Emir Tashem. The schos HaTorah, again the schos of Torah on such an incredible day, a day of Kol HaPoisha Anoisin Lai. What better day can there be? Hashem should be nice and light to these two incredible Yidden, sponsoring today's Shir as a schos for them and their families. As well as, of course, the Shir should be a schos of Rizal Chaim Devar Shimon ben Bilo, Shlomo ben Libizava, Ovi ben Teli, as well as a schos for Shlomo Shmolius ben Neveda, Shmuel ben Tila, the Nafsal Spim Lester, Nachama Bas Viva Bashava Fego Bas Ashira Chana, Besoich Sha'ar Chayla Yisrael. And we're picking it up. Today is Daf Yod. And I'm sure many people were a bit upset that yesterday's Shir and Daf Tes, we ran through Tesam and Beis, and we didn't maybe explain it in full. So anyone who's looking at your screen, what you'll see in front of you is the Gemara from Teslam at Aleph, because now we're going to go back to that question of Teslam at Aleph, and hopefully we'll get a bit more clarity in the question and the different answers. We're in the middle of a discussion of these answers, and if you see in front of you on Tesam and Aleph, 7 lines at the bottom, Levi said to Rabbi, "My area de Tani Tesvav, listening to Zion. Why did the Mishnah list 16?" And Rabbi responded harshly, "It seems you don't have a brain. My daitcha imoy anusas aviv, imoy anusas aviv plukta the Rav Yehuda v'Rabbanan." What, you want me to say the case of imoy anusas aviv? That case is a machlokes Rav Yehuda and the Rabbanan. So now we're going to go and understand what is this case of Imoy Anusas Aviv. So here you have, nope, that's not the case. Here it is. Here you have the case of Imoy Anusas Aviv. So what happens is a man, if you're looking at your screen in front of you, you'll see he's labeled as Aviv. He is Ma'anes, he forcefully lives with a woman and he has a child out of wedlock. So Ruvain forcefully lives with a woman and has a child. We'll call him Ruvain out of wedlock. This man who forcefully lived with this woman, who's Ma'anes, this woman also has another child called Shimon. And what happens is in this case is that Ruvain's born out of wedlock, and Shimon, what happens is marries this woman. As you see, the dots, the circles indicate marriage. Shimon goes and marries the Anusas Aviv. He's allowed to marry her. He's not related to her at all. Shimon goes and married her. There is no problem. But then what happens when Shimon is nifter? So Shimon's nifter. What happens? His wife falls to Yibam. Who does his wife fall to Yibam? To his brother. Who's his brother? Ruvain. But wait, Ruvain was born out of wedlock from this woman. So what's happening here is a classical case, like we learned in the Mishnah, that we have a case of Yibum falling to Nerva. That Ruvain should be performing Yibum to his brother's wife. The problem is his brother's wife is essentially his mother. He was born from this woman. It wasn't a kedusha, never married, but therefore that's called Imoy Anusas Aviv. And that was the question, why did we not list this as a 16th case in the Mishnah? And Rebbe answered, as you see so beautifully depicted over here from davachayim.org. Check it out, incredible stuff. Rebbe answers, and no, that's a machlokes Rabbanan and Rav Yehuda, and that is the reason why the Mishnah does not list it. Why pluk the loy kamairi? We're not discussing machlokes, which is really what we dealt with yesterday primarily. All the different variables proving whether indeed it fits, whether indeed we're not discussing machlokes in the Mishnah. But now we go back and we go all the way to Yudam Al to today's daf. And we're up to the second answer of why didn't the Mishnah list this case? This case in which Ruvain is supposed to perform Yibum, but the woman that fell to Yibum to him is essentially his mother. So says the Gemara, second line down, Ravada Karichna Kamed Rav Kahana, Amar Mishmei Rava, La'ilam Isay Rabbi Hani Klali. Really, Rebbe holds of all the rules. The klalim that we said yesterday, Rav Chia, Rebbe agrees with that which we learned. So why didn't this come case number 16? Why didn't we have that, not Chamisha Asar, but why didn't we have Shisha Asar, 16 cases of Erva, of Arayis in the Mishnah that there's no Yibum? Explains the Gemara, Ima Yanusas Aviv Bechado Mishkachasla, Betarti Loi Mishkachasla. In the rules in which we saw yesterday, in the rules of Rav Chia, there were two rules. Rule number one was Shtei Achayos, the two Yevamos that fall are two sisters, and rule number two was Asur Lazeh, Mutar Lazeh, Mutar Lazeh, Asur Lazeh. We said it's a seesaw. So says the Gemara, both rules would not work in this case. We'll read the Gemara inside the words, and then we'll proceed to see the beautiful depiction of Daf HaChaim and hopefully understand and realize why the Rav Chia's rule would not work in this case. Says the Gemara, in order to have the case of Rav Chia, you have to have two women. So it's not just that, like the case we started off with, that Yuzmane is one woman, and that woman who is the potential Yevama, and it's not allowed because of Aravo. Yaakov is man, he's forced to live with two women, and they're both sisters. Excuse me. Let's read this correctly. The case that the Achaisa, the sister, is the Yevama, that makes sense. But that cannot be, as we'll see in a moment. And let's say the two women that Yaakov, this guy is manis, he forcibly lives with, are not sisters, rather they're unrelated women, anas. That case is possible, but and therefore says the Gemara, the reason why Rebbe did not list case number 16 in the Mishnah is because it would not fit within the rules of Rav Chia. This is just explaining that Bekulan and Ikarbem, you need to have the two rules. You need to have the Shtei Achayos, and you have Asur Lazeh, Muteris Lazeh, Asur Lazeh, Muteris Lazeh. And says the Gemara, it's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? And here you have it, that Yaakov, again, we're just using Yaakov, I guess, because we don't want to get confusing over here. But Yaakov is ma'anes, he forcibly lives with two women who are sisters, Rachel and Leah. And from that relationship, as you see over here in the center, it produces two children, Levi and Yehuda, which, by the way, if you were to split this picture in half, then you would see the exact case we said before, and each half, that's why we're just doubling the case, basically. Then instead of Yaakov with one woman having a child, Yaakov's with two women having two different children from wedlock. And then what happens? Rachel and Leah, in this case of Imay Anusas Aviv, when Reuven and Shimon marry Rachel and Leah, they're allowed to marry Rachel and Leah. But when Reuven and Shimon are nifter, what happens? And then Rachel and Leah fall to Yibum to whom? To Reuven and Shimon's brothers. Who are Reuven's and Shimon's brothers? Levi and Yehuda, which ostensibly are the children of Rachel and Leah, like we saw before. That if you split either of these cases in half, what you have is that Yaakov violates a woman and has a child. That child, what's going to happen is that his own mother is falling to Yibum to him. As it says over here on the bottom, there's Erva and there's Imai. The Imai is the Erva, and therefore both Levi and Yehuda would not be able to respectively do Yibum to their mothers, Rachel and Leah. However, would Levi be able to do Yibum to Leah and Yehuda do Yibum to Rachel? To that, the answer is a resounding yes. The reason being is that Levi and Leah and Yehuda and Rachel have no relation. There's two different halves of the side, and therefore that would be okay. Now let's go to the next case. What would happen if Rachel and Leah are sisters? And of course, the reason we need this is to comply with the statement of Rav Chia. That Rav Chia had two statements. Statement number one was that Yevama, the two Yevamas have to be sisters, and the statement number two was Hazaris Lazeh, Mutaris Lazeh, Hazaris Lazeh, Mutaris Lazeh. So in the previous case, we had Hazaris Lazeh, Mutaris Lazeh. We had that they're also to one and mutar to the other. But now, when we make Rachel and Leah sisters, which is the other qualification of the statement of Rav Chia, now we run into an issue, because now very quickly Levi and Yehuda are able to neither do Yibum to Rachel nor to Leah. Why not? Because now Levi is related to Leah, because since Rachel and Leah are sisters, what happens is Levi to Leah is Achais Imai, which is an Erva. Yehuda to Rachel is Achais Imai. So the Gemara says, The reason why we did not list this case is that according to Rav Chia, in this case, we'd run into an issue. It would be impossible to comply with the two dinim of Rav Chia. As you see again, quoted on the bottom of the page over here, that you have to have shtei achayos, number one, and you have to have asur lazeh muteris lazeh, asur lazeh muteris lazeh, which would be possible if they're not sisters, but is impossible in the case that they are sisters. And that is teretz number two, why this case was not listed in the Mishnah, why this is not the 16th case in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi Amar, a third teretz. We're about 10 lines down. First word in line is Mishkachas Law. Says Rav Ashi, Lo'ilam Leslie L'Rebbe Hani Klali. Really, Rebbe disagrees with Rav Chia. He does not hold that those rules are true in order to be considered the Erva, the 15 Arayis in the Mishnah. It needs to be Shtei Achayos, and it has to be Asur Lazeh Muteris Lazeh. Uplukta Kamairi. And really, the Mishnah is allowed to say cases of machlaikisim. Says the Gemara, so if that's the case, then what did Rebbe say? Rebbe's retort was, you don't have a brain. Where is your brain? How can you suggest such a havamina if the situation is that the Mishnah is not dealing with machlaikis? But if we're saying that we do have machlaikis, what was Rebbe's retort to Levi? To Kamar Le, explains the Gemara, Hachi Kamar Le, this is what Rebbe meant. My time olodaikis mas nisan. Why did you not learn what you just said from the wording of the Mishnah? That you look deeply into the Mishnah, you'll see the case of Anusas. Imay Anusas Aviv. Temas Nisan Rav Yehudi Da'asar B'Anusas Aviv. The Mishnah is Rav Yehuda that says it is forbidden Anusas Aviv. Dikatani. How do we know that the Mishnah Shitas Rav Yehuda? Meaning the Mishnah comes out, it's going to be a machlaikas, but it's within the Shita of Rav Yehuda, and everything is good. How do I know that? Dikatani. The end of the Mishnah said Shisharayis Chamurus Meilu Mishin Nesuis La'achirim Saraseyim Mutarais. The conclusion of the Mishnah that taught us that there are 6 arayis which are more chamer. What are more chamer? Because they're married to others and they're never able to marry the paternal brother. Therefore, the sarais are going to be mutter. Imai ve'ishes aviv v'achais aviv. In these 3 cases, my imai. What is the case of imai? And now we're going to understand that we see clearly in the Mishnah it's going within Rav Yehuda, and that's why we didn't list the 16th case. My imai. What is the case of imai? Aviv. If you're going to tell me that the case of imai is that his father married this woman. That is, Eishes Aviv, the father's wife. And then the Mishnah would be saying the same case twice. Elolav, what was the case of Rav Yehuda of the Sheish Arayis Chamurais of Imai? Was Anusas Aviv. Was the case of Anusas, the woman that the father violated. Vikatani, and the Mishnah learned that they should nesuas la'achirim. Because they're married to other people, that's why the tzarais, the co-wives, are mutter la'achirim in, la'achirim. But we see clearly that that this woman that was violated by the father is only allowed to be married to someone else, but she's not allowed to be married to the brothers. Who holds such a din that the woman cannot marry the brothers? Man shamis leidisle aisvara Rav Yehuda da'asar ba'anusas aviv. Why? And that is the reason mishamachi loitani lei, and that is the reason why the Mishnah did not list this 16th case of Anusas Aviv as a case of that there will be no Chalitza and Yibum. So we have 3 different explanations answering up the question from yesterday from Tesam and Aleph. Rebbe's retort to Levi that Bivlukta like Kamairi, what's your suggestion of a 16th case? And Imay Anusas Aviv does not work. Continues the Gemara, Amar Le Ravina Le Ravashi. Ravina says to Rav Ashi, Rav Yehuda nami mishkachas law. Ask Ravina 1 second. Even according to Rav Yehuda, you just said the Mishnah is clearly Rav Yehuda, and that is the reason why we don't have the 16th case. But says the Gemara, even according to Rav Yehuda, there's a way that we can find the 16th case that should have been listed in the Mishnah. That what you said according to Rav Yehuda is forbidden to marry this woman. But what happens? The other v'nasev. What happens if you went? If the brother brother went and married her, the halacha is the kedushin works. So maybe we should have listed the case, because then the case to continue, says the Gemara, De'i loy katani. We don't list cases of what if cases in the Mishnah. That is not part of the Mishnah. That is the reason why we don't list this as the 16th case. Amalei Rav Ashi Rav Kahana continues Rav Ashi and asks, even without a De'i, even without it, if we could find the following case, and again, we're going to read the case and then we'll explain it with the utilization of Daf HaChaim's pictures. Yaakov anas kalasai. Yaakov violates, forcefully lives with kalasai, his daughter-in-law, the wife of his son. V'hailin mimenu ben, and there's an illegitimate child born from that relation of Yaakov with his daughter-in-law. Umeis Ruvain. And then what happens? Yaakov's son, Ruvain, dies. V'loi banim. So what happens? Ruvain's a wife. V'nafla kame, Ruvain's wife, who was the daughter-in-law that was violated by her father-in-law Yaakov, now falls to Yibam, to whom? Libra, to her own son, because her own son is her brother, is her husband's brother, So when the husband dies, and thereby his wife falling to Yibam, to his brother, in this case it's her son, and therefore, Umigu di'ihu asira, since she is forbidden to marry, to do Yibam, of course, to this man, as it is her son. Sarasanami Asura, the tzarais are as well as forbidden. So says the Gemara, why couldn't we list this case? This should be the 16th case in which we created a case that there is a case that the tzarais, that the Kohahites are as well forbidden to even a chalitza. Amar Lei, Rav Kana responds, V'achoisa dehetera kamairi, V'achoisa de isura loy kamairi. Our Mishnah is only dealing with cases that are able to happen ba'ofen heter, in a permissible manner, not in cases that happen in a forbidden manner, in the father violating his own daughter-in-law. Says the Gemara, and actually before we see that, let's just see this picture together. You see in front of you, this is the next case, and we don't have a picture of this case. Daf HaChaim does. I don't know why we don't have it in front of us, but that is going to be the case in which we could potentially have said. Says the Gemara, explains the Gemara further, 5 lines from the bottom. Even so, Levi learned this Mishnah, the Mishnah of Imai that was violated by the father. Levi incorporated, Levi listed it, the Tani Levi in his own prices. That Imai Pamim by Teres Arasa, Pamim by Teres Arasa. And that was the picture we just showed, but now we'll explain it in depth. There are times that the mother does a pater, the tzara, and there are times that she does not. Ketzad, what's the case? If the mother was nisuais aviv, was married to the father, and then she marries one of the brothers, one of her son's brothers, the paternal brothers, me'aviv, the achiv me'aviv, is not her own brother, but the brother of her son. This is the case of Imai, who does not pater up the tzara. Why? Because she was never really married. That kedushin was not chal, as we'll explain in a moment. As we turn over to Amid Beis, but what happens? I say imoy anusas aviv. That was the suas aviv. That was the case in which the father didn't violate, but tried to marry this woman, which did not work. But let's say the mother was anusas aviv, like the case we started talking about in Amid Aleph, like the case we suggested in the Mishnah, that if it was violated by the father, and now, then she has a legitimate child. Then she marries the brother. This was the way that Levi incorporated this case into his brisa. Says Levi that even though we list 15 cases in the Mishnah, we have to add in a 16th case as follows. And again, the difference here is going to be whether it's anusas aviv versus whether it's nisuas aviv. In the case of anusas aviv, then the halacha is going to be that it will pater up the tzara. If it's nitzuas aviv, then the Mishnah, then it will not pater up the tzara. So Amar Lei Reish Lakish comes along, Reish Lakish, and says to Rav Yochanan, 1 second. Amar Lei Reish Lakish, Rav Yochanan, Levi Da'amar De'inami Katani. According to Levi, you just told me that you would incorporate a De'i. You would incorporate a case of an if, a what if case. So according to you, Levi, why do you not say a similar case that someone does chalitza, then they get married to that person, and then they die? Again, there's two options. Any case of yibum, you can do yibum, you can do chalitza. You can marry your brother's wife when the brother dies without children, or you can do chalitza and you can say, I'm not interested in this story. Put on the shoe, the spitting. We'll get to that later in the Masechta. But what happens? We've already learned that if you do yibum, it's a full-fledged marriage, 100% married for all forms of the word. If after yibum you go and you get divorced, she's now like a random woman, you can even remarry her. But what happens if you do chalitza to that woman? You don't do yibum. What you do is, you say, I don't want to marry her. You do chalitza. And then, after you do chalitza, you decide, you know what? I want to marry this woman. Are you allowed to? Of course not. Vikitcha, then you go marry her, and then umeis, then that person dies below banim. So now the question is, does that marriage affect the next step or not? Explains the Gemara, Demigu di'i asiri sarasa nami asira. Since she was asar, therefore the brothers are forbidden as well. And therefore asks the Gemara, why don't we say this as a case? Let's see the case. As you see the picture in front of you, that when Rachel is married to Ruvain, that Shimon dies and Rachel falls to Yibum to Ruvain. And what happens over here is, instead of Ruvain doing Yibum to Rachel, he does Chalitza. Afterwards, subsequently, Ruvain goes and marries Rachel. Then when Ruvain dies, what is the status with Leah is the question. The Leah is the Tsar. As you see over here, it speaks out so beautifully, Hu einoi chayav al Chalutza kares, but the brothers are chayav on the Chalutza kares. Let's see that in the Gemara together. Amar Lei, so Rav Yochanan responds, it doesn't apply to the Tzara Asara. That is the reason why it does not happen to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, 1 second, V'lei Malei, why doesn't Rav Yochanan say, Chayvei lavini, v'chayvei lavimini chalitza v'yivim ninu? Rav Yochanan should have had a better answer. That the case is that it's a Chayvei lavim, that the brothers are only usher with a lav, not kares, and therefore because it's only a lav and not kares, v'chayvei lavim b'nei chalitza v'yibim ninu, a chiddush, that whenever we have only a lav and not kares, you could have potentially do yibim and chalitza. So why are we responding? Why don't you say more fundamental? That theoretically would be able to work to the brothers. Answers the Gemara l'devarov kamarle, a classical teretz. Rabbi Yochanan is responding to Reish Lakish according to Reish Lakish. L'didi says Rabbi Yochanan according to myself. I really hold Rabbi Yochanan says the really chayvei lavim and chayvei lavim could do chalitza and yibam. According to you Reish Lakish chayvei krisis that is the reason. That is his response. And really over here, actually, the Gemara now is going to go a bit deeper. So again, it's not 100% clear. We have a machlekes of Yochanan and Reish Lakish whether there is potentially Yibum and Chalitza for the brother. Again, in a case that instead of doing Yibum, the guy did Chalitza and then he went and married her. That guy dies. When he dies, does this woman fall to Yibum to the other brothers or not? We just said it's machlekes of Yochanan and Reish Lakish, and I understand we didn't fully explain what the machlekes was because the Gemara now is going to do that. So Itmar says the Gemara, let's see it together, about 10 lines down. And again, we're within the larger discussion trying to figure out whether there's going to be a 16th case in the Mishnah, or more precisely understanding the sheet of Levi, that he said that there is a 16th case in his own Braisa. So Itmar says, the Gemara, if someone does Chalitza v'chazar v'kitcha, this is the case we're talking about, then he marries her, Amar Reish Lakish, here's Reish Lakish, Hu einay chayav al chalutza. He is not chayiv if he goes and marries the chalutza karis. He's not chayiv karis. But the brothers are chayiv karis. Alatzara beinu ben achiv chayiv alatzara karis. But the tsarais are the same din. They all have the same din. The chayiv karis. Let's see Rav Yochanan for the contrast. Then hopefully we'll go back to that picture, we'll work through the whole picture, and hopefully then we'll have a bit of clarity within this machlokes Rav Yochanan Reish Lakish with the person that chalitza subsequently did kedushin, what is the status to the sarais with regard to the brothers. So that was Reish Lakish. Rav Yochanan Amar, about 15 lines down, the first one line is Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan Amar, beinu bein ha'achin einoi chayavim. Neither he nor the brothers are chayiv, loyal chalutza kares, v'loyal atzares kares. Why not? My time at the Reish Lakish, where does Reish Lakish come from? Where does Rav Yochanan come from? Omar cross says Reish Lakish, v'asher lo yivneh. Now we're finally understanding what's going on over here. Kivan shlo yibana shuv lo yivneh. Says Reish Lakish, you blew it. You missed the chance. You could have been bana. You could have married this woman. You didn't. Boom, it's over. Kivan shlo yibana shuv lo yivneh. You're not allowed to afterwards do such. Ew. And now the Gemara explains Reish Lakish's shita. Only he, the one that did chalitza, who did kai lo yivneh. So he's in this new lav, this lav of lo yivneh that you messed it once, you can't do it again. You want to now, after you did chalitza, after you said no turn, now you want to go into kedushin? No. Special pasuk saying lo yivneh. The special isser of lo yivneh is only on he, the brother that said no, that did chalitza. Aval echav. What about the other brothers? What are they? The other brothers didn't do anything. She fell to yibum. This guy got involved in the chalitza. Now this guy wants to do kedushin. Great. What does that have to do with the other side of the coin? What does that have to do with the other brothers? They didn't do anything. The other brothers are the way that they were back from the beginning. Again, but only on only on the chalutza, on her herself, there is the lo yivneh, but on the tzara, they're as they stand, because they had nothing to do with this party. That is Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish is coming along with a new limud, a new pasuk of asher lo yivneh, that once you said no, you, that brother that said no, you have a new lav upon yourself, but no one else is involved. For Rav Yochanan, but comes along Rav Yochanan and says, Mika midi dimeikara. Says Rav Yochanan, 1 second. Are you going to tell me? Originally, whichever brother wanted could have done chalitza. Or if this one wanted to do chalitza, and this one could have done chalitza, v'ashta, and now says Rav Yochanan, because this brother did chalitza, what's going to result? Kayala bekaris. You, Rav Yochanan says, you're going to flip the whole story, and you're going to say because one brother did chalitza, now there's going to be a new karis? That can't be. Rav Yochanan says nothing changed. Rather, says Rav Yochanan, the one that does chalitza is acting on behalf of all the brothers. It's not in a vacuum. It's not that he did chalitza and everyone else stays as they wish, like Reish Lakish says. Says Rav Yochanan, no. When he does chalitza, he's ostensibly acting on behalf of all the brothers, saying we're not marrying the wife. And he, when she does chalitza, similarly, she's acting on behalf of the tzara. And therefore, the status of both the tzara and of the woman is going to change according to Rav Yochanan, whereas according to Reish Lakish, it will not. Now, let's go and let's work through this picture and understand this wonderful case of Achoyles liyivimta v'chazer v'kitcha. Here it is in front of you. Those that are looking, those that aren't, we'll try to explain it in words. You have Reuven and Shimon. Shimon is married to a woman named Rachel. Shimon dies, and now there's two brothers. There's Reuven and Levi. Reuven and Levi have a choice right now, chalitza or yibum. Reuven says, I'm doing chalitza. So right now we can really freeze and say, that act of chalitza, what was that act of chalitza? So there's a fundamental difference in Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan, how they view that act of chalitza. Rav Yochanan views that act of chalitza as something that Reuven is doing on behalf of everyone. So it's as if Reuven and Levi and the Sarah, Leah are all involved right now because chalitza happened. Once that chalitza happened, it changes the status of Reuven and Levi, the brothers. It also is going to change the status of the tzara because Rachel did chalitza. That's how Rav Yochanan looks at it. Whereas Reish Lakish says no. Reuven acted in a vacuum. He did chalitza. He does chalitza. New Isser, says Reish Lakish. New Isser asher lo yivne. Once you don't get married, shuv lo yivne, you can't get married anymore. But what about everyone else? As you see so beautifully played out in this paper, according to Reish Lakish, what is Levi's status? V'achin chayavim kares. They're like they were originally. The regular Isser Ishes Ach stands, and therefore, similarly, when it comes to the Tzara, it's going to be the same halacha. That's Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish views what's happening between Reuven and Rachel as their own little story. Reuven thereby having new Isurim Asher Yivna coming upon to him, whereas Levi and Leah are a different story entirely. Now, here you have played out the whole story. What happens when after Reuven dies? Now it's stage number 2. So Reuven did chalitza. He subsequently married Rachel. Now Reuven dies. What is Levi's status? So this is the machlokes Reish Lakish and Rav Yochanan playing itself out. According to Rav Yochanan, Reuven acted on the behalf of everyone. Reuven did chalitza. Says Rav Yochanan. So now Levi, still there's some connection going on over here. So says Rav Yochanan, Levi is chayiv in chalitza. There's no erva going on. It's a regular chayiv lavin, and therefore says Rabbi Yochanan, Levi has to do chalitza. Says Reish Lakish, no, you can't do chalitza. Why not? Because you're an erva. You're a regular ishes ach of the original marriage of the first brother. What's the halacha? Ein Allah of klum. That's what Reish Lakish, Rav Yochanan's going to say. Sui chalitza min ha'achem because of the chayiv lavin. That's really the next step of the Gemara. We're going to stop over here before the next question of the Gemara, in which the Gemara is going to delve a bit deeper, but that is the fundamental machlekes Reish Lakish viewing the action in a vacuum, Rav Yochanan viewing it on behalf of everyone, and the ramifications that happen based upon that. And we'll pick it up from Esvei in the next year, B'siyata Dishmaya.